We're joined with Koffi Kouakou. He is African Analyst, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Kofi, I apologize to you if there is any construction upstairs. It has been going on all morning. It is deeply aggravating to me, but fair enough. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing well. Can you see my face because it looks a bit dark there? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, you look fine with the
Okay.
beautiful map of Africa in the background.
Excellent.
No, you look great.
No,
No
I'm
issues at
doing
all.
fine. Sorry for the noise on your side.
Yeah,
I
it's
hope
so
there's no
far.
noise on my
It,
side as well.
no, it seems that we're in a lull in the storm. I don't know if
Mm.
Airbnb complained to the owner, basically bitched at the owner. I don't know. But you know what? Real quick, I sent 10 different audio files because I've been complaining all morning, and I've been taking audio of the noise, like of the banging and the like jackhammering, like right overhead, and just sending them audio files constantly. He would say something, I
Yeah.
just didn't remember the audio file, just all morning. I had like 20 different audio files for the last hour and a half, 2 hours. And finally, when it was like, yeah, I can't do anything about it, I was like, okay, I'll go to Airbnb itself. We'll deal with it that way. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. Serenity now. It's just, man, it's been going on all month. It has not been this bad, which is what set me off this morning. But man, I'm glad you could join me. So the reason I asked you on, Ramaphosa, South African president, is in the United States. And from my understanding, this is after Donald Trump rescued the white South Africans who was under the oppression and under a death sentence by the South African government. He
Genocidal.
rescued them. Yeah, right. All of these people who never missed a meal a day in their life seem perfectly content. Coming into the U.S. while simultaneously him kicking out Afghans, not allowing people from like Sudan or some of these other countries that are literally in civil wars. But whatever, he had to rescue the white South Africans. And Ramaphosa is here apparently to do a reset in the relationship between the United States and South Africa. Now, part of the complaint that the U.S. has is obviously South Africa was the one that that initiated the process of going to the ICC about arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, or for that matter, the ICJ. I believe it was the ICJ, saying they're committing genocide. And even given the documentation to demonstrate they're committing a genocide with, it was like 10 to 15 pages, was just comments by Israeli officials and the things that they were saying. Meaning, it is very difficult for somebody to prove that this is in their minds, this is their intent. But if you give 10 to 15 pages of just words and comments by the government, okay, well, you've demonstrated intent because you can just relate to what they've said. So, but Ramaphosa is here. He's like, okay, we need to reset this relationship with the U.S. This has gone off the rails. So this is him coming down the airplane. I don't shaking hands, telling everybody hi. Now, what I don't see is, I guess they did roll out the red carpet for him, so God bless on that. My question is very straightforward. What does he plan on giving Donald Trump to reset this relationship? I mean, Donald Trump is racist. There's that. I mean, the white South African thing is, if that's not evidence of it, I don't know what is. Getting rid of the African American Museum and going after parts of that. Okay, that's random and weird and so out of the blue. That's the thing you need to focus on. Not allowing people from, let's say, African nations to come over that are in war-torn countries, but rescuing white South Africans who are apparently under an oppressive government and being killed by the South African government. Okay, this stuff is weird, right? So in that ludicrous context, what is Ramaphosa going to give in order to reset this relationship?
Oh, thanks for having me again, Jamal. Keita, this is a very important meeting. I mean, South Africa is in the spotlight today. So in a couple of hours, which means basically 5:30 p.m. South Africa time, and I think 11:30 Washington, D.C. time, the meeting will take place. But there are plenty of things that have taken place already in the background. Softening up stuff, making sure things are all right. People are very worried about a great deal of concern about South Africans, I've already mentioned to you, is they just don't want to see, a three-layer humiliation, you know, and that is first Ramaphosa himself. In fact, I would even say four. Ramaphosa himself as a president representing the symbol of South Africa itself, Africa, and then potentially the global south, or even you can toss in the BRICS as well, because anything that happens there, South Africa being part of the BRICS, also will affect the image of it. They would think that South Africa is a weakling. But that being said, I think I'm just setting up the context so far. It's a high stake, high risk, high stake meeting. And the advantage is on President Trump's side. It's on his home court, if I want to use the sports metaphor. He's playing home court. When we used to play basketball, we knew that we had advantage when we're playing on our home courts. So Trump's going to use it well, very well. But to directly answer your question, there's a famous saying in Latin saying, "Monstra me pecunia," which means show me the money, right? Monstra me pecunia. And then, the old days, the guys were really, they knew it, and that's what Trump is probably going to be focusing on based on the question you asked me, that transactional instinct. Say, show me the money. There are many ways to show the money, making sure that, American companies have greater access to the mineral wealth of South Africa, buying property. I mean, this is a vast country. About two, no, 1,202 something thousand square kilometers. That's a huge place. And not only that, South Africa has also got a special real estate at sea, about 2.3 million square kilometers at sea. I mean, this is a lot of place to play, and even some space around Antarctica. So I think the president is not disclosing really what he has, but many of us were speculating, looking at the fact that he's going to have to offer something to calm down the nerves. But you have a point. The place where it's going to be a bit sticky is on the ICJ. But before I come into the ICJ, many around here think it's a meeting of oligarchs, right? So you have two oligarchs. One oligarch or billionaires. They're both billionaires. One who is a businessman turned politician, and the other one, President Ramaphosa, was a union leader turned businessman turned politicians. And he's been very smart in negotiation. He's known, he's got the skills and so forth. But there's no assurance that this one is going to work favorable to him. But people are crossing their fingers. They're hoping that there will be a big meeting that's going to come out as a sort of, to use the Chinese term, win-win. Ramaphosa will probably show something, and there will probably in the backdrop, something has already been cooking. But still, I think they still want to stick it to Ramaphosa, especially on the ICJ. Back to it. This is the stickling point. It will be very difficult for South Africa to withdraw that case at the ICJ. If South Africa does this, South Africa will be seen as a morally bankrupt country and weak, and that's going to play on its whole history and future for the rest of their lives. So this is going to be a sticking point, and there's nothing really there to negotiate because many countries have seen it. The genocide is happening. There's a lot of denials of people. I mean, it's unbelievable. After all the evidence, you've mentioned the 15 pages of evidence. There's more coming up every day.
Yeah.
If people don't see that as a very serious issue, there is something wrong with their mindsets, frankly. So whatever President Trump's going to, if he spend the time on this, that we suspect that it's going to turn out to be a very difficult one. So on my side, I see basically three scenario projections. If we're talking about the sort of, if you're very worried and then you're focusing on the Zelensky, what many people call the Zelensky moment, but I also call it the Zelensky curse. There are three scenarios to look at. The first one is what I call the handshake trap, where the president is photographed with, nicely with Trump, President Ramaphosa, of course, and then President
Ooh, okay, he'll be back. Okay, he will be back. Give him a moment. We just have the handshake trap effectively being photographed, shaking Donald Trump's hand, and it gets blasted to everywhere in South Africa that you are effectively shaking the hand of Donald Trump in this situation. I guess the question for me, like the reason why I asked is, what do you give in this situation? I mean, yeah, there may be a business element to it, but I suspect there's a racial element to it also. I mean, after all, Donald Trump brought all of these white South Africans in order into the country in order to go with this idea of white genocide, right? So how do you have a conversation with Ramaphosa and not bring that up, even if that's a stalking horse for another issue, even if it's a fig leaf for another issue? How do you bring the president of South Africa here? Have a conversation and sit down with the president of South Africa. And whatever opening statement or closing statement you give as a memo of this is what we discussed, this is what we talked about, this was the context of the conversation. To not have, we agreed that South Africa would not murder white South African farmers. That's what we agreed upon. We'll see if that's what ends up taking place. I have a hard time believing that you can get away with this conversation with this particular president and not have that come up at the very least once, where that becomes a memo. And, you know, what does Ramaphosa's head of the ANC, right? This is supposed to be a revolutionary or party of revolutionary fervor in order to right the wrongs of apartheid. Ideally, that's what it's supposed to be. So how do you, as constituent head of that party and of the president of that country, how do you walk away knowing that that might be in the memo saying that we also discussed the killing of white farmers and the horrible treatment of white South Africans in the country of South Africa? Will your Black delegation accept that? Will the Blacks of South Africa even accept that? How are they going to take a statement like that? And for that matter, knowing full well that Donald Trump is the one that rescued white South Africans. How do you deal with that? That may be what Koffi was talking about. Like when you shake his hand, you're shaking the hand of a man that accused South Africa of murdering whites and murdering white farmers, and stealing their property. And this goes to the whole Elon Musk thing too, right? Elon Musk is here. Elon Musk is supposed to be meeting with Ramaphosa also. What does that look like back home? What does that look like back home? Yeah, that is a tough one. That is a tough nut to crack if you're Ramaphosa and you are coming here because A, Trump is passing sanctions. B, he's putting more pressure on South Africa in the way that he's effectively operating. And in passing more sanctions and putting more pressure on South Africa, you have a business community in South Africa that says, look, you need to go fix this. Ramaphosa comes to try to fix it. Okay, what does that mean to fix it? Is that cutting tariffs? Is that trying to eliminate tariffs and trying to allow more business into South Africa? What does it mean? And what do you give as Ramaphosa? Koffi, dude, I'm doing the show. Obviously, I can't pick up. And what do you give in that situation in order to make that work? Those are tough questions, especially if you're the president of South Africa and the president and head of the ANC proper. Those are difficult and tough questions. All right. Koffi may not be able to make it back on. That might have been why he was making the phone call. So I want to go to another issue, which was going to be my monologue before my guest comes on. I have consistently made this point, and I've been an honest actor with it, meaning I haven't taken a position that I am God's all-knowing, and having God's all-knowing can decisively come down on one side or the other. So I've given you two versions. It could be this or it could be this. The white hat version, what you see is what you get, or the black hat version, that this stuff is contrived, that there's a media manipulation that's taking place in order to create space to allow something else. I am coming down more so on that part, especially on the Israel, Iran, the US spot. Let's be very clear. Oh, he's back. He's back. Kofi, welcome back. I couldn't pick up
Yes,
Kofi. I was
can
in the
you
middle
hear
of the
me?
show. You're
Yeah, no,
fine.
no, sorry, it was on your side. Apparently, the network on your side was down. I don't know why.
No, mine is up. I was with the audience the entire time.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right. So, listen, where was I? I think I was talking about the three scenarios.
yeah, three scenarios.
And let me go back probably to the three scenarios very quickly so that you can go with the other question. I was saying that the first scenario, in general, the concern about this meeting is the upside risks that we can see. And then so there's this idea that there was a Zelensky moment, what I also call the Zelensky curse. And I put it in three scenario projections. The first one, as I said, was what's called the handshake trap, if you remember, where President Ramaphosa will take a picture with Trump, and then suddenly Trump will shake his hand and then announce very brutally some kind of sanction against South Africa, and that will be really a big spectacle, as I was saying. And then the second scenario is the what I call the tough talk fallout, in the sense that President Ramaphosa would challenge directly President Trump, if not openly, and then the meeting will end abruptly. But I don't think that might be taking place. And I think President Ramaphosa is smart enough. If he does that, it's going to have a huge implication for markets, for the rand falling apart, losing different trade agreements like the AGOA with the United States. And there could be a much longer diplomatic freeze for the next 3 to 4 years. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, which I call the strategic reset that you mentioned already, is the idea that, behind closed doors, the two, or at least the two camps, have managed to cut a deal, and allows the transactional stuff to take place. And then it'll quietly de-escalate the tension and mitigate the risks, among, between these two. And I think this is probably what everybody's hoping for, that best case scenario. However, it's not a given President Trump's approach to things. People are still concerned. They want to see what's going to happen in a couple of hours. But we are all hoping something good will happen to it. But people are worried that they don't want South Africa to give away the whole barns, which means South Africa needs to save its sovereignty one way or another.
There's one more that I want to add to that. That Donald Trump, who brought over the white South Africaners, in the readout or in any kind of conversation that they're having in the open, brings up, hey, I need you guys to stop killing white South Africaners also. I need you to stop killing these white farmers. Meaning the fact that he brought those farmers over, it makes it very hard for him to ignore it. I mean, let's say that the white South Africaners was a stalking horse for something else, that he doesn't fully believe this stuff about a genocide of whites in South Africa. And who knows? Donald Trump is just, I really don't believe he knows anything about the world. I think people just tell him stuff and he just runs with it. So if Elon Musk says, hey man, they're killing white South Africaners, he says, oh my God, they're killing white South Africaners. And that's what he goes and tells the media. And so he brings these people over. How does he not bring that up? It's such a big thing, right? It's such a big spectacle. You have all of these chubby, overweight people who apparently are being genocided coming into the airport. And how do you not say something about it to Ramaphosa while he's here? And do you say something to him? You two are sitting there in the Oval Office, and Trump is like, hey, by the way, you need to stop murdering the farmers. That's the fourth.
Yeah.
You could do it. He would do it.
Yeah.
He would do it.
I think you've got a point. But in my really crazy mind here, I'm like sitting and I'm thinking, President Trump, after all the thing, after his tour in West Asia, it looks like something has come to him where he started looking into becoming a little bit more realistic. And I hope his people have briefed him enough to understand that Africa is at the center of tomorrow's world. Critical minerals, South Africa, for example, has 15 of the 17th most critical minerals, the rare earth elements. This is very important. So he can't, if he cuts with South Africa, not only American companies will lose out, there will be a very difficult way for him to convince the rest of Africa. He may be able to deal with a few African countries by coercion. But I think if he gets the right information, he's now probably rethinking. We know, for example, that strangely enough, he hasn't even set up his Africa team fully. But you got to give him room though. After about 4 months or so,
Yeah.
And he doesn't think Africa is a priority. But very soon, as many of us are knowing, he's slowly getting the information that, my goodness, Africa is an important place to deal with. And South Africa might be your leverage to be able to move into that continent.
Yeah.
And so giving that kind of strategic information and knowledge, it might be able to tone down the rhetoric and not attempt to sort of dismiss or humiliate President Ramaphosa in public as he did. Well, I think the part that he did with Zelensky, many of us thought it was okay.
I thought it was fine, personally.
Exactly. Yeah. But with Ramaphosa, I mean, he doesn't have the cards, right? I'm sure he's not going to say I have the card, but in this one, he doesn't have the cards. So it's going to be difficult to convince people that there's some really, well-fed Afrikaners who are now being genocided here. And I mean, there are crimes here. Frankly, we can't avoid this. I mean, many of us are not happy, dealing with crime and employment, inequality. South Africa is the most equal country in the world on the Gini coefficient, in terms of inequality. So these are very serious challenges. And, Black and White are trying their best to come out, but people want the president to do a little bit more. So if he's successful in Washington, bring that success home and convert it into domestic challenges and deal with them. But we're hopeful that President Trump will just won't go off on the limb. And I think I have a pretty sense that it might not happen that way. It probably could turn out to be a very lame meeting.
I hope it is. I hope he's respectful. I hope none of that stuff comes up. I hope it's.
Yeah.
See, Zelensky pissed him off in that meeting. That's why he went off the rails.
That's
and
right.
when he's talking to Europeans, he just does it. He just holds them in contempt. Like when he's saying Justin Trudeau came here and cried. Okay, he holds them in a bit of contempt because from his point of view, they were backing Joe Biden. So it's a little bit different. So he may deal with Ramaphosa differently, but I'm not sure. I mean, Trump is a...
Yeah. No, I would agree with you, but remember, that one thing we did talk about is Ramaphosa's team. He's managed to really build a strong team. I mean, almost all of them are billionaires, and they talk golf. These are the things that really pushed up President Trump's button. Probably they're probably going to offer him some kind of casino hotel somewhere in the Western Cape. I don't know yet. But he's got one of the wealthiest, white guys, Rupert, on board with him. He's also got some of the old golfers that are sitting with him, white South Africans, very well known, who playing. And he's also there with his brother-in-law, who's also a billionaire, Patrice Motsepe, who's also the president of Confederation of African Football Association. So they've built that team with the hope that something will happen. And I think among wealthy and elite people, they like to hear that they're meeting with, people who have some substance in terms of material wealth, that they're not sort of coming in dressed in sandals or pretending that, they're poor people coming to beg for money to the United States. Right. I think if President Ramaphosa goes the begging bowl, he will have a hard time getting out of there. I wouldn't say alive, but escaping from it.
So is the issue the sanctions, not the sanctions, the tariffs? Basically, that he wants the tariffs removed. He wants something to assist with some kind of business development in South Africa. Like he's looking, meaning, why is he doing this reset? Is it because of business interests in South Africa? That's the issue.
It's largely transactional business. Look, I mean, as I told you again, the team is brought with him or not. There's no poor person in that team.
Yeah,
It
they
doesn't
don't
mean they're not,
disrespect.
they don't care about poor people, but this is
Yeah.
a meeting of billionaires. And with the hope that if they can cut a deal, it'll also benefit poor people. And I think the 30% is quite high. And if they can get a reduction on it, that'll be a good one. But I think to a large degree, the US, I mean, President Trump might have a point. I mean, South Africa has been benefiting from this relationship more than the US has. You see,
Hmm.
so perhaps there will be some more overtures from South Africa to say, look, by resetting, it's to look at the not just diplomatic relationships, but trade relationships, and then making sure that American companies have room to maneuver in South Africa, not just being bogged down. Also, with another one, there's a what's called Black economic empowerment laws that really oblige any company, any person who wants to do business in South Africa to shed off 30% of that company to the locals.
Yes, but
See,
again,
yeah.
South Africa, it's an
Look, I'm
apartheid.
talking
It was a
about this because this is one of the gripes of Trump's
Elon
advisor,
Musk.
Musk. And as you know, Musk has been in the news lately with his the Grok. I'm sure you've read about the
Yeah,
Grok issue. But more important, it seems like South Africa is trying to soften up the part to give a deal to Starlink. And Starlink, I mean, this morning I was in an interview with the local media on Starlink in Africa. They're really progressing very fast. More than 20 countries are now dealing with them.
mhm,
Of course, it's not going to be easy because there's security and sovereignty issues involved in this. I mean, if the data is somewhere, data sovereignty becomes more important these days. Somewhere the CIA can enter it easily and controlling. People are worried about that. However, African countries themselves haven't done a good job in making provision of these kind of satellite opportunities to make
yeah,
sure that strategically their people are connected in telecommunication. That's a huge gap, and that's a huge weakness. In fact, it's not only Elon Musk Starlink that's going to take advantage of that.
I know.
We're hearing that there's a Chinese company that
Yeah,
also want to compete against
yeah,
Starlink and then put the satellite up for free.
yeah. But see, that's the rub, though. South Africa
Mhm.
was an apartheid state. You
Yeah,
have, as you pointed out, the inequality is off the charts. And so the laws are based upon the history of South Africa. They're trying to balance the scales. And
yeah.
so Elon Musk, white South African, is like, oh, I don't like that. Okay, yeah, but dude, you've been advantaged by a
Yes.
country that was an apartheid state for decades. And now that they're trying to balance the scales, it's like, oh, we don't like that. We think that's unfair. By the way, we deal with the same thing here in the United States. You had blacks who effectively helped build this country as slaves and
Yeah.
worked for hundreds of years. And then at the end of it, you get nothing for it. You're called a free slave. And then even when after you try to go through Reconstruction, there's a clawback and a response to the Reconstruction. You have redlining. You have all of these laws. Even this kind of implicit bias built into the society, going all the way up to like the 80s, if not beyond. I mean, not to mention soft racism, dealing with doctors and those type of things. And so it's like, hey, blacks have like $14,000 of wealth. Whites have 114,000. You don't think that's weird? Yeah, but we don't want to do anything about that. It's unfair to try to fix that. And I'm saying the same thing is true in South Africa, where you
Yes.
pass laws with the ANC and you get a white Afrikaner who is saying, I don't like those laws. And he just so happens to have the ear of the president of the United States, who is, I would wager to you, is going to put pressure on Ramaphosa to try to change those laws. And this could be the last
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Will
Yes.
would Ramaphosa even do that? Could he even do that, considering he's
No.
part of the
To answer
ANC?
to answer your question, the laws will be difficult. He can't do it alone because that's got to go through Parliament, and people in Parliament, including the opposition leaders and the people in the African National Congress, are against changing the law for one person. Remember, the law must apply to everybody.
Everybody, right?
And largely, if that legal understanding is upright and put up there, it will be difficult, but they probably will find other ways to source it up for
That's right.
Elon Musk to do business in South Africa. And they probably need his business. In fact, most NC people have been too late to deal with Elon Musk. They should have done it a long time ago to look into possible, especially on energy issues and so forth. But I think now that they're under pressure, which is an amazing thing for South Africa, one thing that I've noticed is that every time there's some kind of danger or outside pressure in the country, everybody comes together. And I remember that, the 2010 World Cup football, the Rugby Cup a couple of years ago, and many other things, the ICJ and so forth. So this, to a certain degree, is forcing South Africans to look at themselves and come together as a group, white, blacks, or mixed race and so forth. And I think it's going to push something about South Africa to do the best, not just internationally with the ICJ case or with the trade between the United States, but also relook at the self domestically. And as I said, there's so many domestic challenges to deal with. And we don't need anybody from outside to tell us how to do that.
That's right.
And we're hoping that the lessons will be learned and that the president come out of this stronger. But if he doesn't, South Africans will take the world, they'll do their best. And I think we can't cry on spilt milk. If the US doesn't want to do business with South Africa, it will be the US's loss, because there are a lot of others, as Victor Gao, former translator of Deng Xiaoping, said, the world is becoming so big, the market developing almost everywhere, that the potential for finding other opportunities, even especially on the African continent that South Africa has neglected, in its own backyard. The whole continent, all these countries, 54 of them, having trade businesses going up to only 15%, Jamal. This is a shame. It should be 85 or 90, even 100% in partnership to move about on the continent. So, the challenges are there. However, it is hoped that this meeting brings the best out of South Africa.
Koffi Kouakou, he is African Analyst, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, thank you for this, man. Really appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
Thanks, Jamal. See you again.
Absolutely. Cheers. All right. That fantastic breakdown. Koffi is always fantastic with his breakdowns. Going from one to the other.